Good evening. We're going to just sing once and then give it over to Brother Shirk. We've enjoyed your ministry these 2 weeks, and thank you for coming. Turn your hymnals to number 17. We've sung this at least a couple times, maybe more than that. But it's kind of what we've been talking about. What I think about often is, God, you are sovereign. Oh, Father, you are sovereign. Try to concentrate on the words as you learn the tune if you don't already know it. We'll sing all the verses. Just the last two lines of the third verse. All evil overruling as none but conqueror could. Your love pursues its purpose, our soul's eternal good. I think she was thinking of, thinking of Romans 8, and especially verses 28 to 30 or 31 there. All right, we'll turn it over to Brother Shirk. It's yours.
Well, thank you, Steve. And once again, it's really great to be here. My wife and I have thoroughly enjoyed our time with you folks. And I do just want to commend Tim for the excellent job he's done in communicating with me and all the behind the work and details that are involved in lining things up with a speaker and such. So Tim, thank you for your good work along those lines. I thought I'd just take a moment, all this is going somewhere, just to introduce you a little bit so you get to know me a little bit more, because it really does all dovetail together here. This is what my wife and I have been doing for the last 46 years. God has blessed us with 5 children, 5 adult children, And I've been in ministry a little over 40 years total, but we're just really thankful. We not only have the 5 children, we have 14 grandchildren. One is in the incubator, and we'll be seeing them shortly. Just real quick, not take long with this, but starting on the far left there, my daughter with her husband Corey, they are in ministry in the state of Washington, and we're going there a week from Tuesday. First time we're going to be able to visit them out there. We're going to go out there for a month and see them. Then my next daughter, there with her husband DJ and their crew, they live in Nashville, Tennessee. And then my wife and I, then Tori and Greg, they live in Stafford, which is just outside of Leroy, and they're 3. And then my son and his wife Christy, and they're down in St. Petersburg, Florida. And then my daughter, at the end, she married Hector. She was a short-term missionary down in Peru for a while and met him, got Twitter-pated, and they got married. And they live right down the road here on Stover Road, and she teaches at Chestnut Ridge Elementary School. So that's just kind of neat, just right down the street here from the church. So that's our crew. And so thankful for God's blessing in so many ways, and especially for the privilege that we had over the last 36 years to pastor at Grace Baptist Church. Like you, we had multiple building projects along the way, and God blessed along those lines. That picture on the upper left corner is on my last Sunday walking to church. And my wife snapped that picture. I look at it and it's like figurative of me walking into the winter of my life. But walking to a brand new beginning, and that was the last Sunday. And we are just so humbled at the goodness of God expressed to us through our church family over the course of our departure. And that last Sunday at the end of the service, they outlined the sanctuary, circled us, and had a special word of prayer. My successor, Pastor Jeff Bartz, got saved under our ministry when he was 15 years of age. And it was just so cool to see in the course of time God get a hold of his life. We saw what God was doing, and we supported him through his biblical education. And in the course of time, he was able to come on staff, and he received a 100% vote to be the next lead pastor there at Grace. And the church is just really flourishing under his leadership. And we're just really, really grateful for God's good hand there at Grace. And then also, I was the chaplain of the City of Batavia Police Department for the last 22 years. And probably if God had not called me into the ministry, I would probably have pursued a career in law enforcement. And so that was just a real special blessing, because I got to see the inner workings of the world of police work. I was certified with the International Conference of Police Chaplains and received training from them, and did a lot with the police department. We saw men come to Christ, wives come to Christ and become a part of the church family, even become a deacon. And we just saw some really, really neat things. And so that is special for our family in the timing of all that to be there for when we retired from that ministry. And that all leads us to what we're going to be looking at here tonight in a series that I had put together on the theme of biblical counseling called Hope When Life is Harsh. Because both personally, and then if I can put it this way, professionally or pastorally, and then in the realm of the police world, I just had a front row seat in seeing just how harsh life can be, with all kinds of things happening to people. Things that are incredibly difficult, multiple child deaths, through dying in the crib or drowning in a pool or burning in a house fire, to multiple suicides and walking into homes after someone just found a loved one hanging there in their garage, and just on and on and on I can go with stories of instances of walking into very, very difficult situations. Nobody gets a go-free pass from experiencing the harsh realities of stuff hitting the fan and you just wondering what are you going to do next. Even fascinatingly, on my way up here tonight, I got a phone call, and I look and I see it's from a member of our former church, and so I answered it, and he said, "I just wanted to let you know that Gay passed this morning, his wife. And she had some physical issues, but he has worse physical issues than she does. They're not really that old. I don't know, maybe about our age." Oh, she just retired. So anyways, she had some physical issues, was home, and said this morning, "I'm not feeling well," to her one son, and they think she passed a blood clot, and called an ambulance, and they lost her on the way to the hospital today. So he's just calling me to let me know. It's fascinating, like what I said this morning. Everybody has an expiration date, and you never know when yours might be. It's just an interesting providential arrangement. And so that's the reality of it. And one of those harsh realities of many things that we could talk about is the harsh realities of aging and dying. And if we're going to have hope in the face of those, what we need is right thinking. And so that's my goal with this topic and other topics that we cover, is to help us as God's people to have right thinking, right understanding when it comes to these dynamics, and especially the dynamics that we'll look at here about aging and dying. And we're going to be looking in particular at two Psalms, but the Psalms not only instruct us in how to live well, but they also instruct us in how to age well, and then ultimately how to die well. And so we're going to cover 3 points, and I trust that you have the handout there. And if not, maybe you could raise your hand and I'll ask somebody to task to get you one. But I think Tim was passing those out, so I think you're good with that. And you can track along with that. And as you see there, we're going to talk about the dilemmas of aging, and as well the difficulties in dying, and then how to get to the finish line is where we want to end up. This welcome to your life right here in these images. It's just fascinating. You, like I said, you get Twitter pated, you get the ring, you work hard, you get a house, you start acquiring things like you got to have that pickup truck, and you start making money, you make a variety of accomplishments in life, you get stuff, and then you get a dog. Frankly, for me, that was the worst parenting mistake I ever made. Sorry if you're a dog lover. I don't hate dogs, they're just not for me. And I learned that a little too late. And then, you've got the children coming, you're planning for retirement, and things like vacations and getting your toys and maybe even a second house someplace, whatever. And then you die. And the question is, well, what next? What next? Well, what we see here is the reality of aging. I think this is interesting. Some celebrities here, the pictures of them getting older and older. And this is a few years old. So these people even look worse now than they did here, okay? There's Bill Murray. You see his aging process. Dick Van Dyke, he's 98 years old now. I heard him recently say, "Man, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." But, and then Willie Nelson, he's always looked old to me, but anyways, and if you don't think that is happening to you, here's proof positive that it is. There's my senior class picture, okay? And so you can see, yes, aging happens to us all. We all change. We're not the person that we used to be. Maybe you can relate to that. Here's the wife helping her husband out. Well, that pill is for your heart. That one is for your eyes. That one is for blood pressure. That's for diabetes. That's a blood thinner. That's for cholesterol. That's for dizziness. And then he says, well, what's for dessert? Like, this is my meal. And maybe you feel that way with your regimen of pill taking. And then this one as well. If I don't go to the doctor, he can't find anything wrong with me. That's how I stay healthy. You just turn a blind eye to the reality of things taking place, and you hope for the best. I like this quote: aging is not a simple slope which everyone slides down at the same speed. It is a flight of irregular stairs down which some journey more quickly than others. Have you ever found yourself someplace and you come across somebody that you say, man, they have really aged, and they're probably looking at you and thinking, man, they have really aged. It's just interesting. It hits us all, but there's not a one size fits all. Some of my material there, and I mentioned Paul Tripp this morning, and how his writings have blessed me. And some of the material, while I've gotten it from a variety of sources, is from his resources, one of which is a great book. It's called Lost in the Middle, Midlife in the Grace of God. Highly, highly recommend that. That book, the truth that he unpacked in that book, figuratively speaking, really saved me from throwing in the towel when I was going through some crushing circumstances in my life that were just really, really hard, but lost in the middle. And that's where I said this morning even how he unpacks. It's always easy to start something. It's great to finish something, but it's in the middle where the challenges are, and some of the material that we'll have here tonight reflects some of the truths that he unpacks, and I have found it to be very helpful, and I trust it'll be encouraging to you as well. First, what we want to do is look at the dilemmas of aging here, and note there Psalm 39:4, Lord, make me to know my end and what is the measure of my days, that I may know how frail I am, just how weak. All flesh is as what? Grass. We're innately frail, we're innately vulnerable. And this is the psalmist's prayer that he has. And we want to unpack some of those dilemmas of aging. I like that picture of the old guy, looking in the mirror, and he sees the young guy, staring back at him, the young him. And, it's not the same. And so we just want to work our way through these, and those are the dots there in the dilemmas of aging. It was John Glenn who said, there still is no cure for the common birthday. It just keeps coming. They keep rolling by, year in and year out. And you might not say you're not old. You're just chronologically gifted as it comes to the age process. And aging, it's that season of life where there is more of life behind you than there is in front of you. It's when the leaves are off the trees and you find yourself in this new season. And so what we want to do is unpack the struggle. And there's a variety, there's multiple characteristics of the struggle. No one is going to have all of these things. But you might be able to relate to some of them as we tick through them. And you can see there the first two there, the reality of dissatisfaction. You begin to look around and you don't like your life. You feel the sand of your youth slip through your fingers, and it just is passing right through. You're not a happy camper about life. You find yourself in a constant state of lament about all kinds of things, maybe your job, your spouse even, your life situation, and you just find yourself struggling with dissatisfaction. Disorientation. It's where you're saying, I thought I knew who I was. and what I was supposed to be, but now I'm really not so sure. You know, I don't know my place anymore. I don't recognize myself anymore. You know, I used to be the young guy. I used to be the young guy, but now I'm the old guy. It's fascinating, you know, being with the police department and how, you know, when I came in 22 years ago and young officers coming in and then they retired from that role before I did. And just that fascinating dynamic of experiencing that, you know, man, I used to be the young guy, but now, you know, I'm the veteran here. I'm the old guy here. You know, disorientation has to do with our identity and our function. We go on here, and here are the other ones. I'd thought this was arranged in my presentation to go one at a time, but they're just coming up all at once here. But we'll tick through them. Discouragement is a reality of it. And this is where, you know, again, the leaves are off the trees. And you've lost the expectancy, the vibrancy, and hopefulness, and the courage of your youth. It's hard to face the fact that now you're more cynical than you are expectant. You know, you used to be an astronaut. You know, the sky was the limit. But now you're an archaeologist, and you're kicking around the potsherds of your past, trying to make sense of the broken pieces that are in front of you. Dread, you know, things like tiredness is interesting. I don't know if you heard how President Biden decided that he would drop out of the race now, and I heard that from one of the news people there, how he said something to the effect of, you know, just the tiredness factor. That's a reality of it. I mean, he's, what, 81, I'm 68, and man, I know that, with me even. And you feel that. Things like tiredness and you know, weight gain, aches and pains and high cholesterol begin to remind you that you know, I'm not young anymore, and that my physical clock, it's ticking every day. And now the only things that are growing on me are my ears and my nose, you know. That's what you see. And so dread, disappointment. Two realizations can hit you very powerfully as you age, and that's regret, coulda, shoulda, woulda, and dashed dreams. Things that you thought would take place, but you know, hey, it just didn't pan out that way. And you can find yourself disappointed because of that. Disinterest. I'm no longer interested in the things that once excited me. That career challenge, you know, it's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. As I mentioned with the police department, it was interesting to watch time and time again. Young officers come in, and they're all enthusiastic. And, you know, the first thing they want to do is they want to, you know, get on the ERT team, the SWAT team. And then after that, they want to get off the SWAT team. And they want to then, you know, become a detective because it's a little bit easier and so forth. And then in the course of time, just to see how they can become the most cynical members of the department in light of the harsh realities of what they're faced with every day. You know, where in this matter of disinterest, you know, I'm experiencing a huge loss of motivation in my employment, in my relationships, you know, in my hobbies. All those things can be our experience. The reality of then distance with all this going on. You know, I begin to withdraw. You know, I don't talk anymore. I just clam up, and I'm just nonverbal in my relationships. And then distractions. See, with all this going on, like I said, nobody's going to have all these, but you might be able to relate to some of them. There's this reality of distraction with all this swirling around inside of me. Here's where I'm in a very real place of vulnerability to temptation. And temptation never has an expiration date. It's always something that we're all vulnerable to. I had a class, one of my last classes in my last educational pursuit was taught by Dr. Wendell Kempton, who probably some of you are familiar with. And I remember him saying, you know, purity never gets easier as you get older. And he was spot on with that reality. And so what can happen when it comes to distraction, you've got all these things going on, and so you start looking for some excitement. You start looking for something that's going to bring some something into your life that you're not experiencing. And so, you know, what can happen then is I'll try to feed the struggles of the inner man with outer man pleasures, and that will never work. It's like shoveling smoke with a rake. You can't do it. It's like bailing water with a sieve. It won't happen. Very interesting. In Batavia there, we have the Batavia Downs. It's, you know, a racetrack and a lot of betting and stuff. And the way it's designed is, you know, their main parking lot is across the street from the building. And so people to get there, they have to cross the street. And so you're always having to stop there to let, you know, their customers go in. And it's fascinating when you're standing there, you know, sitting there waiting. The majority of the people going in, they're all old people. They're all old people. And it's interesting too, in looking at in the Daily News newspaper, the police blotter, it's fascinating there. So many times it's filled with people who are older, who are getting themselves in trouble because they're looking for some kind of hit to satiate their inner man struggles, and it just won't work. You see, in today's culture, growing old is seen not so much as part of the human condition, but rather as a solvable medical and scientific problem. That's why the cosmetic industry spends billions and billions of dollars trying to help make us look younger. But the brutal fact of life is that the moment we're born, we begin to die. And my latter season of life in its most basic form, it's not an event crisis or an awareness crisis or a midlife crisis. Rather, it's a crisis of my heart. It's my season of harvest. It's that time in life where now I start to pick what I've planted all along. See, the end of life doesn't introduce you to a new you. It forces you to admit who you've been all along. That's the reality of it. And so that's what we see there in the dilemmas of aging. Let's next move to Psalm 88 here and look at the difficulties of dying that we see here. You know, Psalm 88 is probably one of the darkest psalms in all of the Bible. And it simply reminds us that life doesn't always have happy endings. That's the reality of it. And the Old Testament sees death in all its hideousness. It is surrounded by no halo of any kind. And Psalm 88 marks out that truth. And so what we want to do in a few minutes here, let's walk down the hallway of the hospital and make our way into room 88. And here as we come into this room, we discover a patient in Psalm 88 who is terminal. And according to verse 15, this person has been sick for a pretty long time. And note with me, please, what we observe here in light of the difficulties of dying. First of all, what we see there is overshadowing anxiety. Overshadowing anxiety. Note verse 3, the first part of it, where he says this, "For my soul is full of troubles." We had a dear woman in our church a few years ago. It's fascinating pastorally, and Pastor Richard can relate to this, how, you know, you have your church family, and you actually become friends with some of these people. That's the reality of it. And And was just a wonderful woman. We saw her husband come to know Christ. He was a state police helicopter pilot, and their children come to know Christ, and just some neat things. But she got cancer. It was terminal cancer, and was dying. And it was just a really hard time for that family, for our whole church family. She is dearly, dearly loved. And one day, she was moved into hospice care. And one day my wife went in to see her, and she described to my wife how she was really struggling at night, and she was just really full of anxiety because she had difficulty breathing, and it was so upsetting to her at night, just not being able to breathe well. And then she told my wife, but I came here to die, so what should I expect? Fascinating commentary, and that's the reality of what some people can experience, that overshadowing anxiety. Loss of control there, the latter part of verse 3, where he says, and my life draws near to the grave. I can't stop it. You can't stop this process where you see the end is coming. I watched my father die. And long story short, you just see that process where it's looking like it's going to be coming any moment soon. Irreversible diagnosis, 3 there in verse 4, where he says this, I am counted with those who go down to the pit. I am like a man who has no strength, just powerless, with reference to being able to turn anything around. Feelings of being forgotten and abandoned by God, verse 5 and verse 6, where he says this, adrift among the dead like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more and who are cut off from your hand. That feeling of being forgotten by God can be a very real experience in that difficulty. Being guilt-ridden, verse 7, where he says, your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you have afflicted me with all your waves, that sense of helplessness and being fraught with the could've and should've and would'ves. 6 there, being friendless, repulsive, trapped. Verse 8, you have put away my acquaintances far from me. You have made me an abomination to them. I am shut up. I cannot get out. The dying process can be, and I've seen, unfortunately, multiple people go through that process. It's not a pretty experience, and you've witnessed that as well, I'm sure, in many ways, and the psalm captures that here. And then finally, emotional exhaustion in verse 9, my eye wastes away because of my affliction. And then you go to the very last word of the psalm. Look at the very last word of the psalm. What's the very last word in Psalm 88? Darkness. Darkness. Theologically, darkness is where travelers lose their way. It's where bad guys hide to do harm. Why in the world is Psalm 88 in the Bible? Doesn't God get it? Why in the world does he have that there? Well, in fact, God really does get it. Because, see, Psalm 88 is all about finding hope when there is none. That's what it's about. And what we have in this psalm is the voice of our suffering Savior who experienced all of death's pain, degradation, horror, and loss. And someday when you die, no one on earth will go through the door with you, but you must remember David's words, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. You are with me. God is with you. Who is with you? Jesus is with you because he says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. You see, your friends and relatives cannot go with you as you die, but if you know Christ as your personal Savior, the one who is closer than a brother promises to never leave you or forsake you. You see, Jesus, like no one else, has a firsthand knowledge of what you're facing, and he'll be with you as you face death and as you die. And his life, his death and resurrection are your guarantee that beyond death's grave, there is a glorious new life. And so that's the reality in the difficulties of dying that Jesus can very well relate to and comfort you through. And then finally here, directions to the finish line. We come to Psalm chapter 92, because Psalm chapter 92 helps us with not only how to live well and age well, but it also helps us how to end well with our lives. And note with me here, first of all, to be sure of the main thing, and that's your standing before God. Note there, only righteous people enter heaven. And I realize you folks are well taught and you get that, but not everyone does. Only righteous people enter heaven. And I've said this many times in the course of my ministry with people. Your number one job on earth is this. It's to get right with God. That's your number one job. Get right with God. And why is that so important? It's so important because your natural default isn't heaven. My natural default isn't heaven. My natural default is hell. And what I need is the only ticket that's going to get me to heaven. And you know what that is? It's called righteousness. The old theologians called it alien righteousness. It's righteousness from another world. It's righteousness from a sphere, from a person, a one-of-a-kind person, and it's only Jesus Christ. That's the only ticket that's going to get me, that's going to get you to heaven. You know, I love how it's portrayed in 2 Corinthians 5:21. I use this illustration many times where this represents me and my sin. And this represents Jesus. It says this in 2 Corinthians 5:21, for he made him who knew no sin to be made sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. You see, Jesus took all of my sin debt, took it upon himself, and then he gave me his righteousness, the only thing that qualifies me for entering into heaven's gates. And so all that is mine, all that is ours become his, my sin and my shame, and then all that is his becomes mine in that beautiful transaction called justification. And so that's what's so important. Be sure of the main thing. You're standing before God because our natural default, isn't heaven. I've had a lot of funerals, and I've had a few funerals of some people that were scoundrels. And it's very interesting. I've never had a funeral where people who talk about that person put them in hell. Everybody gets to heaven. It's interesting. Nobody ever put somebody in hell that's just died, But that's the reality of it theologically. And so with all this settled then, when your righteous standing before God is settled, and when that matter is settled, features of aging and ending well include these realities. And note what they are there. First of all, real vitality. Real vitality. Note verse 12 there, where he says this, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. I understand that palm trees, interestingly, grow from the inside out, whereas normal deciduous trees, they add girth from the outside, increasing 1 ring per year. But godly men and women, they grow from the inside. There's real vitality there. I love how it says in 2 Corinthians 4:16, even though the outer man perishes, yet the inner man is renewed day by day. And so in this aging process, people who age well can experience real vitality. Why? Because they're growing from the inside out. I think, and I could say their names, I'm not because of live stream issues, but just wonderful, dear people from our former ministry who are on the latter stages. They're older than me, but they demonstrate this real vitality in this season of life. Note as well, lasting accomplishments, where it says there in verse 12, how they grow like a cedar in Lebanon. It's interesting that when King Tut's tomb was discovered in Egypt, furniture that was made of Lebanese cedar, it appeared just as fresh as though it had just been made the week before. And even today, it's still on that country's flag. And like those cedars, godly veterans grow strong, and what they do lasts forever. It lasts forever. Note also, they're marked by sustained purpose in verse 13. Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. Here the imagery, it suggests a vine that traces its leafy wanderings back to its roots, being deeply anchored in God's house, drawing its life sustenance from nearness to the Father. And the point simply is this: faithful elderly stay committed to the plan and purpose of the local church's mission to be about more and better followers of Jesus. And that's what's so encouraging about this ministry. And to see you as a body continuing to be all about the main thing, and that's more and better followers of Jesus Christ. And so they're also marked by productivity. Verse 14, note there where it says this: they shall still bear fruit in old age. They shall be fresh and flourishing. Where it says there, they shall be bear fruit and be fresh. That literally is translated, they shall be full of sap. That's what it's talking about, this freshness. They're full of sap, and they're flourishing. They're literally, they're green. I've seen elderly people, some people either become better or bitter. And they'll be either full of sap or full of something else. And it's such a blessing to see many elderly people even still using their gifts and abilities for the Lord. And I can think of individuals, back at Grace, and I'm so thankful for the maturity of the elderly people that we had there. As you go through life, and in light of the scriptures telling us, I love Psalm 145 verse 4 that says, "One generation shall praise your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts." It's my conviction that it's the older generation's responsibility to pass down to the next generation the glory of God, and to see the vitality and the reality of what it looks like to live for an awesome God. That's our job. And our younger generation needs to see that. And in the course of our experience there, we realized that we had to make some changes. Some of the ways that we used to do things, needed to be changed. They just weren't working anymore. And I'm so thankful for the fact that our older generation understood that while the message doesn't change, sometimes methods do. And you got to adapt, you got to changes. And as we made changes, we never had a lick of problem from our older people in some of those dynamics of change that we had to implement there. Why? Because they got it. They understood that their calling was to be all about reaching that next generation and helping them, because they were about the main thing in honoring God in their lives. And I'm so thankful for the legacy that they have left and continuing to serve the Lord and demonstrate real productivity to that younger generation. And then finally, their godly influence in verse 15, where he says, "To declare that the Lord is upright, he is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness with him." You see, no young person just starting out in the Christian life can attest to this. These are hard realities learned in the crucible of everyday living, of being married 50 years, some of it great and some of it extremely difficult, of raising children and getting through those difficult teen and young adult years, of stretching the paycheck and struggling to give your tithes when the money was scarce, of being faithful to the church when it was in crisis, of loving a family member who was dedicated to your destruction. All these dynamics, these are people who know there are no shortcuts in life. They learn that the Lord is upright because they're a part of a world that is teetering. They learn that the Lord is their rock because they live in a world where everything else is crumbling. And they learn that there is no unrighteousness with God because they experienced and persevered through all of the unrighteousness about them. I appreciate this quote by Charles Haddon Spurgeon: "To be prepared to die is to be prepared to live." See, as the winter of your life approaches, you'll take up residence in the life that you have built. Develop a healthy fear of aging poorly and a deep longing to age well. That's what I want to do. I just find this season of my life so fascinating, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it with the dynamic of the change of this season of my life. And I'm sure many of you are in that transition as well. You see, but here's the reality. If you want to be godly then, you need to know what it means to be godly now. You can't live an apathetic spiritual life now and expect a purposeful, meaningful old age. I had the privilege to have both of my in-laws' funeral, and then as well as my own father's. I said even this morning, my mom is still alive at 94 years old. And those times were always very interesting occasions. That on the picture on the left there with that calligraphy there, it's beautiful handwritten calligraphy by J.D. Barrett, a gentleman from our church. When I came to Grace, he was in his 60s. He had just retired. He died at 98. And he was a master calligraphy artist and just was a wonderful, wonderful prince of a man. And we always joke, when I came there, he told me this. He said, "You can't leave until you have my funeral." And so at his funeral, I said, the reason why I stayed here for 36 years was because, you know, I said I wouldn't leave until he died. So I was just waiting for him to die. You know? But we would joke about that over the course of time. And anyways, he had a variety of physical challenges. And we got note that the doctor said that this time he wouldn't make it home from the hospital. And so my wife and I went to visit him in the hospital, and he was just as amazingly bright-eyed and verbal and present. And we just had a wonderful visit. I even got a phone, a picture with him, and he's just as smiling ear to ear. And he said this, he said, "You know, the doctor told me that I wouldn't make it home this time, but that's okay. I know where I'm going." And 2 days later, he was in heaven. My own father, and having his funeral, what an honor that was for me to have with him, and the legacy that he left in my life. Was he a perfect father? No, but he taught me so many valuable life lessons, and I'll never forget the last time I saw him in the hospital there, and it's too much. I'm not going to tell you the long story, but I was there with him in the hospital, and I said, "Dad, you've been a good dad," and he said, "You've been a good son." And I prayed with him and left, and a day later he passed away. Sure, all of you have similar stories of those kind of realities of people that have gone into heaven that you have loved. And that's the reality of the culmination of life. I like what C.S. Lewis said. I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy. The most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. And learn to hold on to the things of this world loosely. Hold on to them loosely. Nothing's a given. What we have is a beautiful gift of faith. The beautiful gift of faith. We live by faith, not by sight. Hold on to the stuff of this world loosely. Don't let it become your identity, because that just safeguards you from great disappointment. When you lose those things that are vulnerable in life, what you do have is eternity. Eternity. So keep working hard at living with eternity's values in view. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on his tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of his birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that he spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved him know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If you could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and listen to what God has said instead of how you feel. Righteousness is what you need. Should heaven be your home, the gospel is what you must believe and pardon to receive. Christ died for you, your sin and shame. Confess, repent, call on his name, and be forever changed. Today, this little dash might only last a while. Time is fleeting and soon will pass. Your dash will have its date. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, be sure that Jesus is central in about how you spent your dash. Pray with me, please. Father, thank you for these reminders tonight. And God, that's what we want to be. We want to be people who live for the audience of one. We want to be people who live with eternity's values in view, who realize that every moment of our days have eternity's values in them, and they matter. So God, we pray that through this exercise that we've been through tonight and looking at the realities of aging and the difficulties of dying, God, help us to be people who have our eyes fixed on the finish line, keeping Jesus central in our focus and living for his glory and his praise, and looking forward to hearing those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So I pray for your blessing on this church family here. I pray that you would just continue to embrace them as they navigate this new season of life before them, and that they would be spending their days for the cause of eternity and experience and exhibit the joy of the Lord as their strength. And we'll thank you and praise you for it in Jesus' great name. Amen.
Hebrews 12:2, I believe, says we need to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. It's a song not in our hymnals, but hopefully you can either look at the words or the music's in the back. But turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. We'll sing the first two verses of Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Let's stand as we sing. Father, change our perspective, help us to look upon you, and as we've heard all day and a lot recently, help us to think biblically. Think Philippians 4:8. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.